Hello guys, my name is Tajay Brown. This is my YouTube channel where I provide content for CAPE CXC students. One of the reasons for creating this channel was that I noticed there is not a lot of resources out there like study materials, like some reviewing of the subject and so on for students. So being that I was having the problem, I decided that I would fix it and I would also help others as well. As for my qualifications, I am currently doing Unit 2 of Sociology. I did Unit 1 last year, and I received a grade 1. I'm also a Jamaican, so many of my examples that I will provide will be from a Jamaican context. So if you are a Jamaican, you understand how much that will benefit you. And even if you're not Jamaican, examiners like seeing when you're able to draft for examples outside of your country. It shows us how much you are reading. And so, with that said, let's get into our first lesson, which will be sociological perspectives of population. Of course, we will be starting off with the Malthusian theory postulated by Thomas Robert Malthus. Now, Malthus was an English economist and demographer, best known for his theory on population. In 1798, he published essay on the principles of population and relied on the population transitions he observed in English society during the initial stages of the Industrial Revolution. Now, it's very important to understand that the stage, the time in which you base his observation. Because remember that the initial stages of industrial revolution, you're looking at the changes within business place, the changes within countries, changes within families. So the time frame explains a lot as to why he says certain things within his theory, which we will read upon. So looking at the tenets of the Malthusian theory, the main tenet of the Malthusian theory was that the population was outgrowing food supply, right? So Malthus observed that human population was growing quickly, but the food supply was growing at a different rate, which was slower. And so here you understand that he was looking at problems such as food insecurity. And remember that food insecurity is when it's now difficult to get food or have access to food. Now remember that food is a basic need for humans, for people. Without it, you're looking at crime rate increases. Now people will be willing to do anything, whether legal or illegal, to get food to eat because we need it to survive, right? An increasing crime rate. You're looking at a potential destruction of a society. Anarchy may occur, right? So these were some of the things that Malthus was really trying to say in his theory. The next is people have an innate urge that impels them to reproduce, right? And he said that if people did not learn to control their vices, overpopulation would not occur and bring on the fall of humanity. Now, Malthus says, in Malthus's mind, he sees overpopulation as people continuously reproducing, right? So many theorists have criticized him for saying this because they're saying, oh, you can't be saying that. And he's mixing sexual pleasures with reproduction, right? People just want sexual pleasures. However, sometimes that may lead to reproduction. They don't necessarily want it. So these are some of the things that he's been criticized for saying a lot of times. Next, you have misery, hunger, and poverty were inevitable unless humans appreciated moral restraints, thereby accepting strict limitations on the frequency of sexual intercourse. Now, this statement was highly based on Malthus's religious affiliations, right? He was very religious, and so he didn't believe or see contraceptives and birth control as an effective way of reducing the population. He was against it, really, right? So the Malthusian theory provides us with two solutions to controlling the population: the positive checks and the preventative checks. Now, preventative checks would include abstinence from sexual intercourse and postponing marriage until after 25 years old, right? Malthus did not condone birth control for his religious reasons. And this is why I mentioned that it was due to his religious affiliations why he says some of the things and why he's against birth control. Now, the positive checks would include war, famine, pestilence, and diseases, and would be a direct result of increased population growth, right? So, positive checks are really people dying of not necessarily natural cause, but of causes that doesn't involve like murder, right? And so he's saying that's at the end of the day, it's an effective way of the population being reduced. So it's a positive check. Now, Malthus thought that if the poor were allowed to feel the great pain of poverty, then the poor would take steps to avoid the great pain by having smaller families. He was against welfare programs because welfare only encourages the poor to remain poor. Now, Malthus was not wrong for saying this, right? That the poor, they need to feel a great pain. Welfare programs, they only encourage the poor to remain poor. He wasn't necessarily wrong, because, all right, during the 1790s, children were viewed as economic assets to poor people. So, for example, you had farmers, right? Farmers would have many children so that when they grow up, they can work on the farm instead of having to pay for workers, right? So back then, children were really economic assets. The poor family would have their children, boy and even girls, as young as they are, go outside and work, right? Work in order to earn a small income to help the family, right? So he wasn't necessarily wrong for saying that. And with that said, he blamed the poor for their poverty and believed that they played a significant role in excessive population growth. Now, the criticisms of the Malthusian theory. Number one, the main thing, Malthus did not approve of birth control and contraceptives, as these were vices by themselves and favored moral restraint. This was not effective at all, because birth control and contraceptives, they were effective in reducing the population. They, prevented a woman from having a child during the time in which she feel like having sexual pleasures, right? And so it makes things a little bit better, because this is why many theorists was saying that he's confusing sexual pleasure with reproduction. Many people just want to have sex and not necessarily reproduce. Reproduction may result from sexual pleasures, right? Marx, famous Marxist, was of the view that the Malthusian theory favored the ruling class, as moral restraint was only to be adopted by the working and lower class according to Malthus. Malthus was therefore justifying the rules and privilege of the elites, which is true, because in his theory, he didn't mention that the rich needed to, you know, practice moral restraint or anything like that. It was based on, he was mentioning the poor. He blamed the poor for their poverty, right? And so he would be justifying the ruling class, the bourgeois, while the working class people were being blamed. The implied assumption embedded in the moral restraint doctrine was that the poor are the ones who are immoral and the rich are not. An interested and unintended consequence of Malthusian doctrine is that it helps spread the knowledge of contraceptives, although he was against it. Now, man has proven that he is capable of controlling his numbers, such as in China, right? China had a one-child family policy. I remember that China was in 20 before 2022 they were the number one. They had the most population, right? But no, India has surpassed them. And so China tried to reduce their population by implementing one child per family policy, right? Marx and Engels criticized Malthus for looking at his theory wrongfully. What he saw as the problem of the pressure of population on the means of production was actually that of the pressure of the means of production on the population. So here they're really saying that you can't necessarily say that there is an overpopulation. It's not overpopulation that is occurring. It's the fact that the resources within a country is not being evenly distributed. Now, can Malthus theory be applied to the Caribbean? A little bit. Malthus may have its place in the demographic studies of the Caribbean because there is evidence that the region population has increased significantly over the years. Further, with a dependency on imports and a monocropping legacy, the region is often on the brink of food insecurity. Malthus' theory helps us to appreciate the effects of population changes on the region, right? So, a little bit, it can be applied to the Caribbean just a little bit. Um, One of the major limitations would be that the Caribbean population did not increase due to high fertility rate and reproduction rate. The main reason for our population is due to slavery, right? The migration of those 12 millions plus slaves into the region, right? That's what summed up our population. So the theory could not necessarily it couldn't necessarily apply to the Caribbean, but it has its place in understanding the region population changes. So moving on to the Marxist perspective of population. Karl Marx did not specifically write about the population. Marx's theory of population is a criticism of the Malthusian theory, right? Now, Marx's view was that in a capitalist society, the population needs to grow to ensure the capitalistic system and form a reserve army of workers. Essentially, population problems are caused by capitalism. So he's saying that overpopulation it would be bad maybe for poor people, but for the capitalists, that's not they're grateful for it because now you're looking at an reserve army of laborers ready to work for your job because they're poor, they want money, they need money to live. So you have an unlimited resource of workers. You're making money constantly. So that's what he's trying to say that essentially population problems are caused by capitalism. Overpopulation can be solved by the distribution of people, and so there is no real problem. As in the case of poorer states, famine and poverty is the result of domination from a wealthier country that stresses their resources and therefore not people exceeding the population. And development theorists, they may agree with this because a lot of time it's the wealthier country, the dominant culture, the metropoles that may sometimes strip the resources from smaller countries, leaving them underdeveloped, right? Marx viewed poverty was necessary as it would spread out and ultimately end capitalism. So The main difference between the Malthusian theory and the population, right? So Marx actually agreed with Malthus that overpopulation causes poverty. They agree upon that. Marx opposed Malthus' position that population surpasses resources and believed that was only evident in capitalist societies, right? So his counterpart for a capitalist society was a communist, a socialist society. Marx was of the view that capitalism and not overpopulation caused social ills. Malthus stressed the effects of overpopulation while Marx stressed underproduction and felt that it was uneven distribution of resources that caused poverty. So, whereas Malthus focused on individual actions and endeavored to find solutions to the population growth in moral restraint. Marx focused on the economic structure of society and sought the solution in a socialist, socialist ideology. So here's Marx's theory of population, right? Marx and Engels reacted very strongly against Malthus' theory, which they saw as an apology for the status quo. In other words, they held that Malthus supported bourgeois ideology and thus blamed the poor for many of the problems in the world, right? Because remember that Malthus, with it throughout his theory, he kept mentioning how the poor they have an impel urge, they have an urge to that impels them to reproduce and they must practice moral restraint. He didn't base this towards the bourgeois, the ruling class. He didn't base that towards them, it was only to the poor. So essentially he saw the poor as the main problem. Marx presented a reversal of Malthus' thinking about population by counter-arguing the human misery and suffering under capitalism were the result of bourgeois exploitations. Poverty, unemployment, hunger, and malnutrition were the products of the inequalities of capitalism. So, looking at the main tenets of the Marxist perspective of population, right? First, you have capital accumulation and expansion. So, Marx is saying that in a capitalist system, Marx believed that population growth was necessary for the continuity of capitalism. Capitalism strives on the supply of labor, and the bigger the labor force is, the higher profits for the capitalists. So, to maintain this, the working class is encouraged to have more children, as their labor is directly tied to the availability of capital. Low wages force them to sell their labor for meager earnings, essential for the accumulation of capital, right? So, for instance, the colonial era of the Caribbean plantation. To maximize profits, plantation owners kept wages low, resulting in harsh working conditions. Marx's theory would suggest the working class would grow in such a situation, but their wages would remain low, ensuring the plantation owners' profitability. And they're able to get away with this because you're poor, you have to eat, you need money. So you even when you know that the wage is lower and you're getting paid below what you're supposed to, you just have to do it. Because if you don't do it, they'll find someone else who will be willing. So what it does is that it forces people to work, right? Next, you have the principle of the reserve army of labor. One of Marx's central ideas is the concept of the reserve army of labor. The reserve army comprises workers who are available for employment but often face unemployment, redundancy, and low wages. In a capitalist system, an excess of available workers decrease labor demand, keep wages low, and benefiting the bourgeois' capital accumulation. Over time, Marx recognized that the capitalist class would adopt strategies to counter rising wages, such as price increases, the use of immigrant labor, technological advancements, and foreign investments. However, these measures often result in increased unemployment and a reduced demand for labor. Marx theory emphasizes the interplay between population growth and capitalism. In his analysis, the population is influenced by capital accumulation. The capitalist class relies on an abundant supply of labor. If the working class become conscious of their situation and manages the supply of labor by having fewer children, it could lead to improved working conditions and better wages. But people of the working class struggles at delaying gratifications. Now, this should be understandable because delaying gratifications, right, compared to immediate gratifications. You're poor. You don't have enough money to, it's very difficult as a poor person to save money, right? Because you're looking at starving yourself right here. Imagine a pregnant woman. You really think that a pregnant woman would starve herself, or she should starve herself so that she could save money? That won't happen. So therefore, it's very difficult to delay gratification. So for someone who is poor, it's hard to save. You have to be spending as soon as I get the money. So you're staying poor. The cycling of money is happening daily, but nothing is going into your bank account. It's not staying with you. As I get it, you spend it. You remain poor. And so that's how you get to understand the cycle of poverty, right? And the last one was the competition for scarce positions. Now, Marx theory addresses competition for scarce job opportunities, right? And many countries, even within the Caribbean, experience this, right? The basic jobs that requires that CSEC, even CSEC subjects can get you. They don't pay a lot, right? The jobs that pay a lot, you have to go through university, get a degree, right? So you understand that job openings becomes limited. Workers strive to enhance their efficiency to secure employment, right? This increased productivity benefits capitalists by raising output levels. Now remember, if you go to a workplace and you're not stressing out yourself to work, you're taking your time, right? You're not being efficient, they can easily replace you. You're not the only one in the country who knows how to program a computer. They'll find someone else the next day. So what it does now is that it overworks you. People have to be far more efficient than they are. They have to overwork themselves. They have to prove that, hey, I can do this job. I can stress out myself for an entire year. Don't let me go. Let me keep the job, right? And so at the end of the day, the only person this benefit is the owner of the business, the capitalist, because it raised output levels, it raised production levels, right? And so Marxists argue that capitalists profit from the training of labor force, sometimes at the expense of parents. For instance, certain jobs like call centers, community limited in Portmore, Jamaica, requires training to begin, right? So I have to pay in order to get the job to train. And even if you train, right, you not must get the job. At the end of the day, you lose that. You lose the profit there, right? And also, the reason why I actually stated what call center I was using, which is the call centers community limited in Portmore, Jamaica, is because when writing your essay, You want to be able to not just name the business, but give a direct example. So I mentioned the call center community limited in Portmore. So I'm not just mentioning a call center because many people, we know what a call center is, but it doesn't mean you know where a call center is, you know anything about a call center, right? So by doing this in your essays, it may give you a mark because it shows the examiner that hey, you know the things them you're reading and so on. And so you have the Marxist feminists highlight the role of women, who often form a substantial reserve labor force, particularly in jobs requiring minimal skills, right? So females are hired to get less pay. And in Jamaica, many times when you go down to wholesales in downtown Jamaica, right? Downtown Kingston, you see some of them have all females worker, right? Now remember, households is a job where you're continuously walking, you're carrying things for customers, you're taking things off of shelf. Nothing is wrong if a man is there, but why all women? Is because they get paid less than the men. So that is why many times you may see all women working in a small business place. So the criticism now of Marxist perspective on population. Marx was too optimistic about the ability of society to provide for a population, right? Countries such as China and India, with rapid population growth, opted to implement population control methods due to the problems of such populations. Marxists failed to outline any guidelines as to how socialist states would deal with the population explosion, since only capitalist states have population problems. Socialist states such as Cuba, China, and Russia have experienced many population problems over the years, right? I remember Cuba, one of our only Caribbean socialist state, is currently experiencing rapid population growth, aging due to increased family planning patterns, and immigration by the young. Sadly, the Marxist perspective offers no guideline to assist these states. And this is the one of the main criticism that Karl Marx and the Marxist perspective gets over everything they say, because majority of the things they talk about, they mention the solution is a communist state. And so their criticism will be you never gave no guideline, because yes, you said that you gave a solution, but you didn't provide us with information as to how and how we go about it. So they continuously get criticized for doing that, right? Moving on to the neo-Malthusian theory of population. So, firstly, the word neo means new. So, we understand that these theories, they are the one who have adopted Malthus's ideologies, and they've taken in consideration the criticisms received from Marx and the other theories as it relates to the Malthusian theory. So, they've pretty much put it all together in order to create better strategies, and we're going to read up on their ideas. So the neo-Malthusians accepts the basic Malthusian premise that population growth tends to outstrip food supply, and went a further to argue that population growth will ultimately outstrip all resources. Paul Ehrlich, for example, mentioned that the population in developing nations has increased significantly, creating a population bomb that has begun to outstrip resources. Unlike Malthus, they believe that birth control methods are not morally trained or appropriate checks to population growth. Neo-Malthusians have adopted Marx's position that developed nations are the true cause of poverty in less developed nations by consuming almost four-fifths of the sheer world's resources. So you get to see that the Neo-Malthusians, they're far more open, they're far more imaginative, because they understand that, listen, birth control methods, and not more restraint is actually effective. Remember, Malthus based his theory due to moral restraint because of his religious affiliations. Well, the neo-Malthusian, no, they're not looking at that, they're looking for the betterment of the world. So they're going to actually accept birth control methods, right? You see where they adopted Marx's position that developed nations are the true cause of poverty in less developed nations. So looking at the neo-Malthusian theory, it is evident that the neo-Malthusians offer better strategies for population control than Malthus did. They argue that Malthus had mistaken desire to have children with a desire for sexual pleasure. For this reason, the neo-Malthusians were of the view that a radical view on contraception is needed. Additionally, these theories took into consideration the position of Marx. So, the three solutions that they came up with was the family planning policies, limiting the number of children in families. And they did this was really done through, education. Also, right now it's done by advertisement. Remember, it's done advertisement on TV, and it's also done on the social media apps as well, because everyone is on social media, so it's easy to reach a large audience, right? They also mentioned official aid from the West should be used to finance birth control programs, and they said promoting the use of contraception through the aid of health education and media programs. So, many times you've seen on TV, on social media, saying to use a condom, take pills for the females, and they talk about the importance of having one child and the benefits as well. So, for the criticism, uh, the Neomaltosians fail to appreciate the effects of contraceptives on the degeneration of women, as it can cause mental, physical, and moral suffering for some women, which is true because despite their benefits, everything tends to have a side effects, and a lot of time after women taking contraceptives may result in some devastating side effects, may lead to death, physical damages as well. And they also meant they got criticized by the dependency theorists who would reject the view that Western countries should invest in less developed nations, as they would argue that this is the reason they are undeveloped in the first place. So, can it be applied to the Caribbean? Well, yes, it can. Neo-Malthusian theory can successfully be applied to the Caribbean, as there has been a massive growth in the region population, which has caused poverty and lower standards of living. So, like in Jamaica, right? In Jamaica, like Kingston, you have many people resided in Kingston. Kingston is the active area in Jamaica. It's filled with all the major businesses. So many people travel and work in Kingston. And so you realize that the resources aren't necessarily being shared. A lot of times, water may not be available to all residents because everyone is using it. The city is filled. It's almost overpopulated with people. So you see where the standards of living may be lowered, right? There is evidence that the Caribbean women have come to appreciate fertility control methods and family planning as postulated by the neo-Malthusian. So in the 1930s and the 1940s, we have seen where Barbados experienced overpopulation, and they were able to reduce the population growth rate by implementing birth control policies and methods, right? So the women they were appreciative of the fertility control. Maybe one of the factors as to why we women in the Caribbean easily appreciate fertility control is the fact that we're highly known for having a matrifocal culture, single parent family, most of the mother, and so it's easy for girls to understand that growing up with one parent or growing up with a poor parent, it's going to play it have a negative effect on the child, and so we're understanding just how much it can benefit the parent itself to have a child when they are ready. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why females are so open up to fertility controls, right? There's also evidence that increased population growth undermine development and strain limited resources. So as you mentioned about the Kingston as an example, many people are in there because it's the hot city of Jamaica, and the resources they can't be there. There's a strain on it. There's a strain on water. There's not necessarily a strain on electricity. Not a lot of people can afford electricity, right? And so on. There's a strain on good quality roads, right? So yeah, that's the it can be applied to the Caribbean. Now we move on to the eugenesis movement. The eugenesis movement of the early 20th century, spearheaded by figures like Francis Galton and organizations like the British Eugenics Education Society, aimed to promote social and biological evolution through selective human breeding. This movement sought to control marriage and reproduction based on criteria like behavioral traits such as alcoholism, criminality, mental retardation, to prevent the reproduction of the so-called unfit. So these people were termed unfit because, well, if you're an alcoholist, right, you most likely don't have a job. You're probably abusive. You're probably just a junkie, right? Criminality, mental retardation, people who have mental conditions, right? They tend not to perform so well in society. Children with autism would require, or the certain degrees of autism would require additional assistance, right? And so they may be proven to not be so effective in society or so productive, right? Eugenicists believe that modern economics encourage genetically harmful birth rates as productive individuals supported those who were not. Before World War One, British eugenicists were concerned with policies for the mentally deficient and were also focused on addressing declining birth rates, promoting eugenic marriage, and altering the demographic structure of society. In some countries, eugenicist successfully secured compulsory sterilization of certain groups. And the most horrific association with eugenics came in Nazi Germany, where Adolf Hitler used eugenic principles to justify the Holocaust, leading to the genocide of millions, particularly the Jews, the Roma, the mentally ill, who are considered the unfit, and political dissenters, right? So that's a major history, major event in history where we see eugenicist policies were implemented. Throughout the movement's history, a common thread was an anti-democratic stance and a disdain for the poor, which can also be seen in the views of Thomas Malthus. Eugenics is now widely discredited and condemned due to its association with human rights abuses. Now let's look at Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was a history has a history dating back to 1916 when it was founded as the National Birth Control League under the leadership of Mary Dennett. It later transformed into the American Birth Control League, led by Margaret Sanger, during the 1920s and 1930s. In 1942, it became the Planned Parenthood Federation of America Incorporation. Planned Parenthood's advocacy include a wide range of women's reproductive rights. So you're looking at promoting the availability of emergency contraception, advocating for the removal of laws requiring parental consent for girls under the age of 18 seeking abortion. So they really try to provide much more liberty for women when it comes to like birth and so on. They tried and make abortion a little bit easy because they were considering, okay, many females, they got children which was unwanted. It wasn't planned. Many of them were raped and they want an abortion and they can't get an abortion. They're now forced to grow a child that they don't want. These things lead to a lot of problems. Many times they have the child and they completely hate the child. That child grew up in a constant hate environment, an environment filled with hate, right? They advocate for comprehensive sex education in public schools, including discussions of abstinence and birth control. And so in China, policies resembling Planned Parenthood's initiatives were implemented between 1970 and 1992, leading to a substantial drop in the total fertility rate of women, right? China approach included slogans emphasizing eugenics and well-being, right? And remember, in 2022, India surpassed China's population. Population once had the record for most population. However, India passed it, and Planned Parenthood like initiatives were not as successful, and this was due to the deliberate resistance of the use of birth control measures, resulting in continued population growth. These examples illustrate the historical development and diverse outcomes of Planned Parenthood's advocacy and related initiatives, showcasing how cultural, social, and political contexts can significantly influence their effectiveness. The next perspective will be the demographic transition model. The demographic transition refers to the transition from high birth and death rates to low birth and death rates as a country develops from a pre-industrialized economic system. The DTM serves as a visual representation of this evolution, aiming to elucidate the fluctuations in birth and death rates across distinct stages. John Weeks, 2015, asserts that the demographic transition model is fundamentally grounded in modernization theory, positing that as a country advances industrially and modernizes, its birth and death rates decline. Essentially, the theory posits that economic stability corresponds with population stability. The theory was initially formulated by Warren Thompson, observing shifts or transitions in birth and death rates within the industrialized societies over 2 centuries. So later, you had theories such as Frank Nordstein, an American demographer, expanded upon Thompson's observation, proposing that every nation undergoes 3 stages of population growth. The first one was high birth and death rates. The second was high birth rates and low death rates, leading to a population surge because now there are more people. being born than those who are dying. The last one was low birth and death rates. With rapid demographic changes, particularly in developed nations, the model has evolved over time. Currently, it encompasses 5 stages of population transition. While most developed countries have progressed to stage 4, the majority of developing nations are situated in stage 2 or 3. Notably, no country remains in stage 1 presently. Well, at the moment, yes, you still have a few groups that may still be in stage 1, having high birth and high death rates as well. You may have a few out there. But let's look at the demographic transition model table for a while. So we have stage 1, high stationary, birth rates high and death rates high, right? Examples, like I said, you have a few groups that are still experiencing stage 1. Um, Natural increase, it is we are having a slow increase here. Reasons for changes in birth rates, you're looking at many children needed for farming. Because remember, I told you the importance of time in which the observation was based, right? You're looking at before pre-industrialization, right? Children were needed for farming. Many children die at early age. There were poor healthcare and so on. And there was no family planning. This was due to what? Religious or social encouragement. And you understand that now you're able to see where Thomas Malthus was being influenced by religion to not encourage family planning, contraceptions, or contraceptives. We have early expanding, which is the birth rate being high and the decrease in death rate. So now you're looking at a surge right here. And where you'd see an improvement in medical care, which would impact the decrease in deaths. It would have to be an improvement in medical care, water supply, and sanitation. So fewer children are dying now, right? A natural increase where birth rates are falling and death rates are fall slower, right? Improve medical care and diet, fewer children needed now. So you understand that parents don't need children to be working in farms or working in factories now. So there's really no point in hurriedly getting ready to have a child. Right? People slow down. People become career based, career driven, right? And so low stationary, this is when birth rates and death rates are low, right? So you're looking at the causes such as family planning, right? It's being promoted across countries. Good health, improving status of women, right? Women are now career driven. They're no longer they are no longer have a set role of being in the home or being a housewife. Women are now able to go out there, get a job, improve themselves, and so they would consider, and it's also promoted due to their education. They understand that getting a job, having kids after marriage is far better for you, right? So these are the things that impacts the changes in birth and death rates. You know, good healthcare would be improved even more at this stage, and reasonable food supply as well. In stage 5, which is the declining, right? You have countries such as Germany, birth rates are lower than death rates, and this is due to one, an aging population, right? The promotion of family planning as well. This is what leads to birth rates being decreased so much, right? Natural increase is it's now going down. The country isn't increasing in population, And this could be very detrimental to the country, right? You're looking at a labor force, a minimal labor force. This could reduce the production in a country also. And those are the 5 stages. Let's move on to the criticism now of the demographic transition model. The demographic transition model is often criticized as being Eurocentric and assumes that all countries will pass through the same stage, right? Because we in the Caribbean do not have the same model as them. We can't have the same model. Or where did our population came from? Our population came from slavery, the forced migration of Africans into the Caribbean. That's where our population came from. So we could never have the same model as them, right? And the fact that some societies have followed a pattern of demographic transition does not mean that every society will do so. It is possible that specific factors operating in a particular society could speed the transition or delay it, or even freeze at a particular point. It does not take migration into account as a component of population growth or decline. The relationship between population growth and economic development is more evident in developed nations than developing nations, right? The model does not consider the positive and sometimes negative roles the government plays in population transition, such as implementation of welfare programs or the promotion of fertility control. And it also does not take in the recent phenomena such as AIDS. Now we have the Caribbean perspective. So our Caribbean theorist would be George Roberts, 1957, a Caribbean demographer who based his studies in Jamaica, is of the idea that demographic transition theory must be developed specifically for the Caribbean, taking into consideration the historical development of the region, right? According to this model, the region is currently in the fifth stage of transition. So for our Caribbean demographic model, stage one, this stage covers from European settlement to the late 18th century and was a period where population was influenced by the need for labor on the Caribbean plantation and the constant importation of African slaves. Stage two, this stage stretches through 19th century to emancipation and saw a steady decline of the sugar plantation and a redistribution of Caribbean population with the freed black population. This stage 3 characterized from emancipation through to 1880 and is influenced by indentureship and the increase in Caribbean population due to immigrants. Stage 4 is characterized by emigration from the Caribbean to developed nations. And stage 5, the period extending from 1921 to the 1960s. The effects of World War II were felt, but the period saw increased growth in the population due to increased fertility and decrease in mortality. So we see where the Caribbean population, the changes, the transition from high population to having a low population, to having different members within the population. It is due to many factors: slavery, the World War, you have migration, people moving to America, the diaspora, who is all across the world, right? So our transition model, it has to be different from the rest. And so these are the things that makes ours very special to us. And so the Caribbean demographic transition model, it really shows where in the Caribbean, our changes in population isn't really about high birth rates and low birth rates. It's how people move around, the reason, the changes, the factors that made them move, you know. You had the freedom of the blacks, the World War II. Many people move to work in the Panama canals and so on, work on the railways, and many people moved to British. There were jobs there, there were all type of things, right? Many people emigrate. We have a major diaspora outside the Caribbean. So these are the reasons why our transition model would be so different from that of the European. And so this should bring us to the end of the lesson. Lesson was really to, giving an understanding of all the perspectives, right? In the essay, that's really what the examiner is looking for you to understand, because it's very easy to know what they are about. The population theorists, I'd say they're probably the easiest out of all of them, right? Know what they are, understand the meaning that they're trying to give you, such as, Malthus was really trying to say that, listen, overpopulation can lead to other problems: food insecurity, chaos, crime, violence, increase. All these things, you have to understand it. So, hope you learned something new. This is my first video. I will be dropping another video very soon. So, please share, like with your friends, subscribe. That's the most important thing, to be honest. And see you another time.